Ask yourself, how do you think this ends? And when I say this, what I mean is human civilization as it is structured today. It's expanding. And of course, we have all this debt spending globally. The debt spending is based on the idea that governments and institutions can grow their way out of debt. In other words, they're not too worried about the debt right now because they think that the debt will shrink in proportion to the size of the economy in the future. In other words, all of the economic models upon which our world are based themselves are based on the underlying assumption of unlimited growth. This is really important to understand because this idea of unlimited growth is a myth. You can't have unlimited growth because we live on a finite planet. We have finite resources. We have finite labor. We have a finite amount of money, and although they can create more every time they do, they shrink the value or debase the value of the money that's currently in circulation. So you can't create unlimited things without consequences. And this idea that everything's going to grow forever, the economy will grow, the population will grow, the profits will grow, the tax base will grow, all these things, these are assumptions that can't be true. It can't be true forever. And people who are investing in the stock market, for example, are pricing into the stock market all of these assumptions about the future growth of corporate stocks. What if that future growth doesn't happen? What if there's a big shift that changes the outlook? And the same thing with pension programs. They're all based on these rosy predictions of how much return they can get on their investments, largely in the stock market, but sometimes in bonds and other vehicles. But pension funds have made a lot of unreasonable projections that paint this rosy picture of how they can fund the future benefits that they owe to retirees and workers and other people, perhaps people like you. And these predictions and projections are fraudulent. We can't have unlimited growth forever. It's interesting. You can look at the same argument in the cryptocurrency space. Bitcoin, which I've been critical of a lot of the hype of Bitcoin over the last few years. Because a lot of the arguments about Bitcoin come down to, get into Bitcoin because it's going to go up forever. It's a speculative investment. Bitcoin doesn't pay any dividends. You don't own any stock in a corporation. Bitcoin isn't an entity that has any assets. Bitcoin doesn't have any intellectual property or patents or things. You're not investing in a company. You're buying something on pure speculation. And that works great as long as things keep going up. As long as there is continued expansion, then everybody thinks they're doing great. During times of expansion, it's easy to be an investor. You just hold one hand over your eyes, and then with the other hand, you pick a random stock and you'll do well. And a lot of people actually have that kind of investment philosophy, and it works during an up market. But the minute things start to go sideways or down, then guess what? Everything changes. And that can happen at almost any time. Now, humans tend to make the mistake of thinking that the future occurs as a straight line projection of the present. They tend to think that whatever happened in the past leads to the present, and if you connect the dots and extend the line, that's going to be the future. So there's this irrational belief in what we call the linearity of future events. This linearity is not accurate. The way human society actually moves forward and backward is that you have growth for a while, you have economic abundance for a while, and then you have tragic events. You have a revolution, you have an economic collapse, the end of the Soviet Union, for example, the communist revolution in China, cultural revolution there. You have lurches and disasters. You have the Civil War in the United States, right? You have secession. You have the balkanization of Europe. You have conflict and economic issues. The way the world really moves forward is in spurts followed by crisis. And so these projections upon which all these rosy investments and pension funds are being made really aren't accurate when you look at history. Now, of course, you can shrink the time window of what you're looking at, and you can make a projection based on any particular segment of history, and you can say, oh, things are going to be good in the future. Look at the last 45 years. Well, that may seem great, but what if you extend it to 245 years? Then you have nations breaking up, and you have revolutionary war, and you have independence, and you have new money systems, and the collapse of old money systems. And the thing is that history repeats itself. Not in exactly the same way, but the cycles of history repeat because history is based on human psychology, and human psychology has not fundamentally changed. Humans have the same emotions today that they've always had throughout time. Greed, right? Envy, lust, selfishness, a desire for power over others. These things have existed in the human psyche for the entire history of humanity, and they will continue to drive human behavior. And that's why history repeats itself. I heard somebody say recently that history doesn't repeat itself. That how can it? Because the history can't reoccur in the future. I think they misunderstand the phrase. We're not saying that the Civil War happens again exactly the way it did with muskets. But another civil war can happen again using modern weapons, but based on the same psychology that comes around again and again, because the human heart and the human mind really haven't changed that much in 200 years or less. It doesn't change ever, frankly. Humans are still the same. Ancient Europeans, ancient Egyptians, ancient Africans very much think and feel and believe the same as what we think and feel and believe today. If you really get right down to it, the fabric, the substructure of human consciousness is very much the same. All the same faults, all the same failures. We may have advanced in understanding of science and medicine and mathematics, space travel and things, but we haven't advanced the consciousness of humanity much at all. Now, what's especially interesting in this is that the earth changes in much the same way that human civilization changes. The history of the earth and how the continents were shaped and mountain ranges, it's a history of things seeming to go along peacefully and calmly in a straight line, and then suddenly you have these massive disasters. You have an earthquake, you have a volcano, you have a tectonic plate shift, you have a new mountain range virtually overnight. Mountains were not formed over millions of years. Mountains are formed in sudden catastrophic events. They're worn down over millions of years through wind and rain erosion, but they're formed virtually overnight. In fact, in some cases, it can be exactly overnight. Literally, mountain ranges can form in one day or less due to cataclysmic events. A kind of nature reset that reformats all the land, all around it. And that's how human societies actually work, and that's how the human psyche works as well. And that's why we will have wars, and we will have perhaps civil war, we will have collapses, we'll have monetary collapse. At some point, we will have social chaos, and then it'll be a reformatting of society, perhaps with new boundaries, new countries, new states, new cities, new nations. And then from that, things will continue along for a while in a linear fashion. And people will forget about the emergencies and crisis, and they'll tell themselves after a few generations, oh, things are very predictable and calm, and the future is going to be great. We should invest in the stock market again. And the cycle repeats itself again because human psychology rarely changes. So, just something to keep in mind. Thanks for listening. Mike Adams here, the Health Ranger, counterthink.com and naturalnews.com.
Learn more at healthrangerreport.com.
Thank you for watching. If you want to support our mission, visit us at healthrangerstore.com for the world's largest selection of lab-verified superfood and nutritional products for healthy living. It's at healthrangerstore.com.